Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 UPRT Safety Summit for Professional Pilots Worldwide. My name is Paul B.J. Ransbury. I'm the CEO of Aviation Performance Solutions. And it's just a real honor to be here with everybody today. We're excited about the event. A lot of people signed up. And what we're finding is that it takes a few minutes for people to get logged into the session. So we're going to have an opening before we get to our guest speaker today and keynote speaker, the Honorable Mike Graham from the NTSB. So, Randy, let me pop it over to you here real quick. Let's get together and give me your thoughts on the event today. What are your thoughts about what's happening?
Well, it's exciting to be here finally at the event, BJ. As you know, there's been an awful lot of background preparation. I've had great fun working with our speakers to get the information that we need from them. And I realize that not only do we have a great group of professional guests who have amazing expertise in upset prevention and recovery training to reduce the threat of loss of control in flight, as you hear when we introduce their credentials, but they're all folks that we have known for years. And so it's nice to get a chance to work with them again on this event.
Great. And to your point, Randy, the purpose of APS is that we help pilots bring everyone home safely. And I can't think of a bigger honor to be able to host an event like this on this really big area of safety of loss of control in flight. So the way it's going to work is for the people logging in is if you want to watch a new session, what you need to do is go back to the home tab of the event. So go back to the event, make sure you're on the home tab, refresh your screen, and you're going to see the previously live event showing. And then the new live event is going to show up and you can enter in right there. So just one of the challenges of working with LinkedIn Live. So we'll ask everybody today when you're online, when you have a chance, just check in on the comment stream we're going to be watching today. Let us know where you're coming in from. And just as a reminder, we are primarily streaming on LinkedIn Live, but we're also streaming simultaneously on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you run into a problem today at all on LinkedIn, jump on over to our YouTube channel, and that's at youtube.com/APS training. We also have Carrie Bryson out there who's acting on behalf of Aviation Performance Solutions. She's going to be in the chat or in the comment channel. She's going to be helping everybody there, be posting some informative comments about not only how to post comments and some other information, but at the end, she's going to leave a link for you. If you can't get to your question or we can't get to your question, you can just click on that link and submit it to APS, and we'll make sure that we get it to the speaker or connect with you offline. All right, Randy, what do you think about taking us through some of the slides here today and just to do a quick overview of the event coming up? What are your thoughts?
I'd love to do that because I think what folks are going to see is that we have a broad depth of backgrounds, starting with our opening remarks by the Honorable Mike Graham. And Mike, I know, is somebody that you've known for many years. I met him at Bombardier Safety Stand Down a few years ago, and we're really honored to have somebody in Mike's position. We had a little chance to chat before we began the broadcast about the importance of this event and how our views are really aligned on what we can try and do as an industry to reduce the loss of control and flight threat.
Yeah, so Mike's backstage right now, and we're going to bring him on at around the 15-minute mark just to get everybody a chance to get logged in, and that'll going to help us to maximize the viewership for this particular session. So, Randy, why don't you talk about your first discussion? Very, very well-known individual, Captain John Cox, and has plenty to say on upset prevention and recovery training.
If John Cox looks familiar to you, Captain John Cox, there's a reason for that. He has appeared in a couple of TV series, Air Disasters, Why Airplanes Crash, but he's also the columnist for USA Today, answering the Ask the Captain column. John is an experienced airline pilot, a couple of decades of experience in both Boeing and Airbus equipment. He served for 3 years with the ALPA Committee on Aviation Safety, and is going to speak on a little different angle towards upset prevention and recovery training, and that's the view from the auditor's position. And he'll be talking about what a safety auditor would be looking for, and I think that that's going to be very pertinent with safety management system requirements that we're going to see in the very near future.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to hear what John has to say today. So everybody who's on, it's interesting. I just noticed that, in fact, LinkedIn did have a problem streaming, but their tech team was there immediately and found the link to get everybody on track. So it's wonderful to see everybody getting logged in. Okay, let's go over to the next one. And I have the honor of having Sonny Bates is going to be joining me. He's the CEO of Wyvern. And Sonny has a very interesting, concise discussion on LOCI bow tie, unraveling the risk of loss of control in flight. That's going to be a great event today. Well-spoken individual. And, Wyvern really specializes in safety and reducing risk. And I couldn't think of a better spokesperson than Sonny to do that. All right, over to Cody. He may be somebody you haven't known for years from your opening, Randy. Why don't you tell us about Cody a little bit?
I will, and I enjoyed getting to know Cody. We had a very nice conversation on virtual reality. Although virtual reality might be new to upset prevention and recovery training, it's nothing new to Cody. He started off in the gaming business and figured out that, guess what? The immersive experience that we have in video games is exactly what we're looking for in training to improve retention and make the user experience more beneficial. He'll talk about some exciting contracts that he's gotten with the United States Air Force and B-52 virtual reality procedure trainer, how he got to that. And then we'll talk about how we are incorporating virtual reality in the list of different components that we have, the tools that we have to provide upset prevention and recovery training to pilots. And before we go to our next speaker, BJ, I just have to remark on all of the folks that I see. I have Greece, India, Taiwan, Dubai, Colombia, the United Kingdom. It's just exciting to see all of the folks from around the world that are joining us for this event today.
Awesome. Yeah, and make sure as you go through the event today, we're going to have a Q&A with the Honorable Mike Graham. Feel free to put questions in. We'll probably only get 7 or 8 minutes for that, so don't be afraid to use that link to submit your questions, and we'll make sure they get forwarded. All right, next one. Dr./Captain Janine Koshan. I couldn't think of a better expert on human factors. In fact, she has a PhD in human factors, specializing in startle events and distraction and automation. And Janine's just such a well-spoken individual on all aspects that she approaches scientifically. But I think on UPRT, she has just a lot to offer to the industry. She is the CEO of Aviation Research. A busy lady, a lot going on, but we've known Janine for a lot of years. I'm just so happy she volunteered her time to present our event today. And I will mention that all of our speakers are volunteering their time because of their passion associated with overcoming this major threat of loss of control in flight. Anything on Janine, Randy?
I always enjoy working with Janine. I think that in recent years, we have determined that part of the consistency of the problem with loss of control in flight is the human factors aspect. So we really appreciate the opportunity to put a little bit more visibility on that and make the whole industry think about how we can think about the upset event in the real world rather than in the training environment where the human factors are not as severe.
Awesome. All right, over to Captain Burks for you.
Yeah, and Brian said it had to be me to introduce his event because we were the co-chairs together for a Royal Aeronautical Society working group called ICATI, for International Committee in Aviation Training and Expended Envelopes. And Captain Burks, Brian, is a very experienced captain at Alaska Airlines and actually got involved teaching UPRT at Alaska before many years in advance of the United States requirement for 121 air carriers to teach UPRT. And therefore, he's learned some practical insights that we hope that a lot of the people logging in from around the world that might be airline pilots or regulators in the airline industry or management in airlines listen to what Brian has to say about incorporating UPRT in an airline environment.
Excellent. All right, let's move on over to session 6 with our very own Captain Clark Otter McNeese, who's been here at APS after leaving Southwest Airlines. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Major air carrier in the United States to join APS. He's been here with us for 16 years now, and it's just really the heart and soul of what the ideal upset prevention and recovery training instructor should be. Very well spoken, very passionate individual when it comes to upset training, and just a true expert. In fact, Otter was part of the ICAO Go team that traveled around the world a few years ago, helping airlines implement upset prevention and recovery training, and co-authored one of the advisory circulars with the FAA as well. So I'm going to be joining him for that presentation today. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, session 7, Randy.
This is Captain Philip Adrian. Now, when we met Captain Adrian, he was at Boeing, where he was a technical pilot. He ended up in charge of regulatory strategy at Boeing before he left to become the CEO of NTSB, the leading manufacturer of fixed-base simulators for both the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737s. He's also been involved in a lot of regulatory work. He was a co-chair on the LOCART Aviation Rulemaking Committee, the Loss of Control Avoidance and Recovery Training ARC, as well as working with EASA regulatory affairs, that the group that came up with the UPRT requirements in EASA. And so he has a really important angle, which is talking about the use of lower level devices rather than just having to use a full motion level D for everything. He realizes, as we do, that there are a whole lot of lessons of UPRT that can come from other devices. And so he's going to be talking with us about that.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point, is that the event today is designed to be useful to everybody, not just airline pilots, not just corporate pilots. It really is going to be a great resource for people to come back to over and over again. And this particular presentation is, I think the topic is interesting, is to don't overdo it. When you have a training resource that's effective, go ahead and make sure that you use good and don't wait for something that's perfect. And I think Phillips is going to speak very clearly on that event today. So looking forward to that. All right, the last session, session 8, is really the world expert in upset prevention and recovery training on Airbus 4th generation fly-by-wire airplanes. Captain Brad Bennett will be joining us today from South Africa. Brad's going to be talking about the essential stages of airline UPRT instructor training, and he's just been working on airline UPRT, specifically on the Airbus, and in fact, he also does Boeing 737 upset prevention and recovery training, and he is a certified train the trainer of UPRT instructors at the airline. So he will be a great spokesman on the topic of UPRT, but most importantly on how to implement it for instructors, and not just airline instructors, but any instructors. What are the key stages for that to be successful when you're implementing such a complex program? And I would submit to you that implementing UPRT on a 4th generation fly-by-wire Airbus 320, 330, 340, 350, 380 is probably one of the most complex implementations because of all the reversion modes of the fly-by-wire system and the flight envelope protection. Anything to add on this, Randy?
Yeah, Brad's going to win the award for the farthest to participate. I'll tell you how relevant his experience is. Right now, as we speak, Brad is in a simulator working as a training captain. He's going to be running to make his event a little bit later today. So that's how fresh off the street he'll be.
In fact, it's going to be around 11 o'clock at night for him. I believe he's walking out of one session to show up for this. So just really appreciate Brad and his dedication. All right, let's go to the last session. So I invite everybody, if you have time, and we're inviting all our speakers as well, to show up at session 9 today. And it's going to be an hour long, and it's an opportunity to ask questions. And we will ask questions or answer questions that weren't addressed during the event, or if people have questions on solutions, we're going to talk about that. And if you don't ask any, we got plenty of stuff we're just going to talk about among ourselves. So join that interesting conversation today, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It'll be well worth your time to be there. All right, Randy, but another minute to go before we go to Mike. Any final thoughts for the event today?
Well, I just hope that folks will be able to follow along and go back to the LinkedIn homepage and refresh as we go from session to session and follow along. The agenda was made available, and but I really think that we don't have a weak speaker in the whole lineup, BJ. I think this is going to be very interesting, and whether or not it's a topic that you think it applies to you, I will guarantee that people that are listening are going to be learning something from all of the speakers that we have participating today.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. They're well-spoken. And as we mentioned earlier, they are passionate about this, and not only passionate, but experts on the topics as well. All right, Randy, I believe you have a session coming up here with Captain John Cox. We're coming up on the 15-minute mark. So I'm going to go ahead and get Mike introduced, and you are cleared off. We'll see you at that event at the bottom of the hour. It's my great honor today to introduce our keynote speaker, A genuine champion of aviation safety and a passionate supporter of aviation safety initiatives, not only in the United States, but around the world. The Honorable Mike Graham is the 45th member of the National Transportation Safety Board, where he joined on 3 January of 2020. Before being at the NTSB, Mike was at Textron Aviation, where he held a diversity of positions. He started out as a demonstration pilot, then he held various roles within production, flight test, and delivery. His final position at Textron Aviation before going to the NTSB was the Director of Flight Operations Safety, Security, and Standardization. Mike has been a long-standing volunteer to safety in the aviation industry for many years. He served as the chairman of the Air Charter Safety Foundation and Board of Governors, and he led the Single Pilot Safety Group for the MPAA Safety Committee. He started his career in the U.S. Navy, where he flew A-7s and F-18s, and he completed 2 operational deployments over Iraq and Kuwait in support of Southern Watch. Mike has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of New Mexico. He holds an ATP with over 10,000 flight hours, and he's type rated on 6 different models of citations. Mike, it's such a wonderful opportunity to have you here today. Let's pass it over to you for some comments.
Thank you for that introduction, BJ. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you today at the 2021 Upset Prevention and Recovery Training Safety Summit for professional pilots worldwide. As many of you know, the NTSB is an independent U.S. federal agency charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation accident in the United States and significant accidents in other modes of transportation. Although commercial airline accidents have become relatively rare in the United States, accidents involving in-flight loss of control in general aviation, while trending downward, still occur at an unacceptable rate. NTSB data from 2011 to 2020 shows 45% of fatal GA accidents in the United States resulted from pilots losing control of their aircraft in flight. For this same time period, 31% of fatal Part 135 accidents in the United States were attributed to loss of control in flight. There was only 1 fatal fixed-wing Part 121 accident from loss of control in flight in the last 10 years. LOC accounted for over 1,000 fatal accidents in all 3 categories throughout the previous decade. According to the FAA, an LOC accident involves an aircraft's unintended departure from controlled flight. This can be due to a variety of reasons such as pilot distraction, spatial disorientation, loss of situational awareness, or weather, including inadvertent instrument meteorological conditions. The most common type of LOC is a stall, including post-stall spin, which can occur when the pilot allows the aircraft to enter a flight regime outside its normal flight envelope. Stalls happen because a pilot lacks understanding about how a stall actually relates to exceeding a wing's critical angle of attack, or AOA, as opposed to the more common idea that it's just related to airspeed. When airplanes are close to the ground, such as in a landing pattern, there is limited time and altitude available to recover from a stall or spin, making these stalls particularly deadly. Although LOC happens in all phases of flight, approach to landing, maneuvering, and initial climb are statistically the deadliest phases of flight for LOC accidents. One notable accident we investigated in Akron, Ohio, Execuflight 1526, en route to Akron-Fulton International Airport, was on a non-precision approach and descended below the minimum descent altitude, even though the pilots did not have the runway in sight. When the first officer attempted to arrest the descent, the airplane, a Hawker 700A, entered an aerodynamic stall and crashed into a 4-unit apartment complex, killing all 9 persons on board. In another crash that occurred in Huggins, Missouri, the pilot and 4 passengers departed from a grass runway in a Beech A36. After a right turn during initial climb, the pilot failed to maintain airspeed and exceeded the airplane's critical AOA, which resulted in an aerodynamic stall. The pilot and 3 passengers died in the accident. GA pilot proficiency requirements are much less rigorous than those of airline pilots. GA pilots are more likely to have longer intervals between training sessions and between flights. They typically only need to complete a flight review consisting of, at a minimum, 1 hour of ground training and 1 hour of flight training every 24 months. GA pilots almost exclusively maintain and improve their skills and update their knowledge on new technologies on their own. Their conduct of safe flight depends more on the individual's abilities and judgment than on robust training in emergency situations, potentially leaving them unprepared for situations that can lead to LOC. So what can be done? There are many causes of LOC events and suggested potential hardware solutions, such as use of AOA indicators, and human solutions, such as increased pilot training to ensure a full understanding of stall phenomena. Future training should also include understanding of AOA concepts and how elements such as weight, center of gravity or CG, turbulence, maneuvering loads, and other factors can affect the airplane stall characteristics. To prevent LOC accidents, pilots should understand stall characteristics and warning signs and be able to apply appropriate recovery techniques before stall onset. Realize that stall characteristics can vary with aircraft loading and are usually worse at aft CG positions. Be aware that stall can occur at a lower AOA in icing conditions. Use effective aeronautical decision-making techniques and flight risk assessment tools during both pre-flight planning and in-flight operations. Manage distractions so that they do not interfere with situational awareness. Obtain training in emergency response skills so it is more natural to apply those skills in an emergency situation. Understand and maintain currency in the equipment and airplanes being operated. Take advantage of available commercial trainer, type club, and transition training opportunities. Consider installing new technologies such as AOA indicator, which, when coupled with pilot understanding and training on how best to use it, can assist pilots during critical or high workload phases of flight. Pilots play the most critical role in preventing LOC. They have both the ultimate responsibility and the ultimate opportunity to reduce these accidents through ongoing education, flight currency, self-assessment, use of available technologies, and vigilant situational awareness in the cockpit. Just being here today is a significant step in your education of in-flight LOC and its prevention and reduction. Thank you, and back to you, BJ.
Well, Mike, great to have you here, and thank you so much for that really wonderful overview of loss of control in flight, and I appreciate you taking time to join us today.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So I really enjoyed your presentation, and we had a couple questions that we had talked about in advance for today. I'm going to be watching the stream as well to see if anybody has any, but primarily related to I think the end of your presentation, you had mentioned a number of ways to mitigate loss of control. Are there any in particular mitigations that the NTSB is really pushing or hope to see implemented in the industry?
Well, you bet. Looking back at our recommendations over the years, unfortunately, a lot of them are quite old. Most of them go back to at least the start of right after the Colgan Air crash in New York. You remember that? We asked a lot of the FAA for education, not just in prevention of loss of control in flight, but also recognition and recovery techniques and all. And we pushed really hard on the FAA, and as you know, we've got most of those implemented now through the 121 world, the Part 121 world. Unfortunately, they don't see it's very cost effective at this time for Part 135 and 91K operations. But as early as back in 2017 with the Advisory Circular 120-109A, which I know you're familiar with, we've been pretty successful in getting a lot of that education and training written into that document and some other ones. And I would just recommend to operators out there that are from the 135 world, 91K, and even the 91 world to go through that and try to train to that AAC in their own operation. And I think that would help them out immensely.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Looks like we might have a slow connection on you. We can hear you just fine. Looks like your video might be lagging a little bit. We'll see if our transmission service here can put it together a little bit better for the final production. Well, that's very interesting. I think those are great recommendations, Mike. And again, it's always wonderful to see that the NTSB is always ahead on the recommendations, but unfortunately, sometimes they don't get implemented maybe in the time frame that you're hoping to see them implemented. But as we were talking about before, just like in safety and in business, it's often a marathon, not a sprint, right? So it's about being consistent with the message, and I think that's one thing the NTSB has been. So maybe a little bit of a change of topic, but I think it's also on topic. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Part 5 SMS requirements, the FAA in the United States, and perhaps your thoughts on what the positive impacts are going to be on aviation safety?
You bet. That's a good question, BJ. As you're probably well aware, SMS is on our most wanted list for these next 2 years, and I'm kind of the lead advocate for the board on that. And we'd really like to require and verify the effectiveness of SMS in all revenue passenger carrying operations. So, obviously it's already required in 121 operations, but we'd really like to see 135 and 91K get it. But there are some operations out there that are just 91 as far as like air tour operations and some parachute operations, to name a few, living history flights, and even hot air ballooning. We'd love to see SMS as part of those operations, because time and time again, when we go to an accident, more times than not, in aviation and other modes that we deal with, we find that had the operator had an SMS in place or an effective SMS in place, that should have identified the risk that this accident was part of, and hopefully eventually they would have been able to mitigate that risk before it happened. So we've been pushing hard on the FAA on this to get SMS out there to everyone. And if you don't have an SMS yet, and you don't have to be 121, 135, or 91K, but just 91, I highly recommend you put together an effective SMS, engage all your employees, and start managing your risk more effectively.
I love that. You're absolutely correct. And I see we're coming to the end of our time frame here. So I'll ask Carrie with Aviation Performance Solutions to put the link into the chat stream for anybody who wants to ask more questions. But let me just bring one up, and it's from Doug Carr, who we both know, the NBAA. And this kind of leads to your, kind of what you were talking about with this Part 5 requirement. There's, I think, a concern, probably correctly so, some of it's unknown. How does Part 5 effectively scale to the small operators by Doug? I think it's a great question to end on for today.
That's a super question, and I'm not surprised Doug has asked that. He's asked that numerous times to the NTSB and the FAA, and it's an excellent question. And it's a concern of ours also. I'm very aware that there's a lot of small operators out there. We'd love to see have some kind of SMS in there. It can't be the size of a 121 operation. It can't have all the resources of a 121 operation, but it should be scalable. And I'll be honest with you, Doug, I'm concerned about it too. I've met with groups within the FAA on this subject, and I'll be honest, I'm very concerned that they don't understand what scalability is for the small operator. If they can do a 135 operation for a small operator and scale it for them, to me, there should be no reason why they can't scale an SMS for a small operator. So we've been working really hard to meet with them and discuss their plan with that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not convinced that they have a good plan for that. I know back in 2010, I looked at some of their old material that they had out there. It looked like they had a good understanding of it. 2021, I'm not too convinced yet. So not a great answer, but I am concerned, and I hope they get it right.
No, I think it is a great answer, Mike, and navigating these obstacles, but it's going to be well worth it to get to the other side of that for sure, because there will be a market increase in safety. I agree with you on that. All right. Well, we're at the end of our session here today. So I just remind everybody watching to go to the next session. You'll have to go back to the homepage of the event and refresh to watch it. And it does appear that LinkedIn is having a little bit of problem streaming. Don't be afraid to jump over to our APS YouTube site. It'll be streaming there as well. youtube.com/APS training if you're having any issues. So with that, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. And also thank everybody who has joined us today to take time to join this important event on safety. Thank you, Mike. Any last words?
Thank you for having me, BJ. Have a great training session today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. You have a great day. Bye-bye.